Now, Sir Geoffrey Hill was one of the most acclaimed British poets of the second half of the 20th century. Much of his work focused on English history, landscape and religion. Geoffrey was born in Bromsgrove in Worcestershire, the son of a village policeman. He described himself as glad and proud to have been born into the English working class. His academic career took him to Oxford, then Cambridge, across the Atlantic to Boston, and back to Oxford again, where he was Professor of Poetry. I asked his wife, the librettist and Anglican priest Alice Goodman, how she first encountered Geoffrey's work.
It was mentioned to me when I was an undergraduate at Harvard in 1978 by Seamus Heaney. He said the two poets of Great Britain you should read are David Jones and Geoffrey Hill. Unfortunately, I'd had a high school English teacher who was passionate about Philip Larkin, a passion I didn't share. And so I ignored Seamus's recommendations, and Geoffrey Hill was only a name to me.
And when did you change that view?
Some time after I met him. I knew him as a lecturer before I knew him as a poet. He was wonderfully funny, both intentionally and also, to a certain degree, unintentionally. The unintentional comedy largely came from the fact that he wore pink fuzzy socks and that he had a really elaborate comb-over, which was glued down with water. And in the course of an hour, one would watch it start curling again as it dried and gradually lose its intended function.
And so you obviously got to know him at that time. Did you then pick up his poetry?
Yes, I eventually picked up his poetry. It was beautiful.
The people moves as one spirit unfettered, claim our assessors of stone. When the nations fall dispossessed, such conjurings possess them. Elaborate barren fountains, projected aqueducts where water is no longer found. Where would one find Grotius, for that matter? The secular justice clamant among psalms, huge-fisted visionary Comenius. Could none predict these haughty degradations, as now your high-strung, martyred resistance serves to consecrate the liberties of Maastricht?
Hill's poetry has been accused of being too difficult and too complex.
Robert Potts is the managing editor of the Times Literary Supplement.
It was an important part of his art that every word should be made to do the maximum amount of work. There's real economy, especially in the early poems, in which he tries to say as much as possible in the most elegantly constrained space, and he relied a lot on ambiguities.
You're interested in precision, aren't you?
Well, it's precision of a certain kind, because it's precision that can't rule out ambiguity. I mean, in a way, you've got to be precise about the ambiguities. The ambiguities mustn't come in accidentally, because that's a solecism. You've got to be, as it were, accurate in your ambiguities.
One of the poems that most clearly demonstrates that level of ambiguity is September Song, in which Hill is essentially elegizing a victim of the Holocaust. He has a little parenthetical moment in the middle of the poem, very stark, in the middle of what's, I think, essentially still a sonnet, and it goes, "I have made an elegy for myself, it is true." And the meaning of that can go all sorts of ways. It is true that I've made an elegy for myself, or I've made this elegy for someone else, for myself. There is a truth in this elegy that it's impossible to settle quite on what is being said, apart from the fact that Hill is aware of how dangerous it is to be writing about such matters from a safe distance, from somebody who wasn't personally involved, but he's treading on very dangerous ground, and the whole question of aestheticizing and remembering in an honest and decent way is a very tricky one, and that poem ends with what seems to be more a pastoral reflection, hymn safe in a garden, and it runs, "September fattens on vines, the smoke from harmless fires drifts to our eyes. This is plenty, this is more than enough."
Why was he so fascinated by religion?
He had a very, very strong sense of original sin. And I think it's Calvin who says that you can be led to God either by a sense of the greatness of God or a sense of the smallness of yourself. And I suppose Geoffrey belonged in the latter category.
to my mind, he is one of the greatest poets of religious doubt or difficulty after George Herbert or Gerald Manley Hopkins. Hill wrote some exquisite poems about the difficulty of wanting to be in a position of faith, but struggling to have that relationship with God.
As your relationship deepened, how did you find him when you got to know him as a person?
He was wonderfully funny, deeply depressive. People think, I think, that marriages between writers consist of sort of saying, well, what does T.H. Green say about this? Or something philosophical and grand. There was plenty of the, whose turn is it to take out the rubbish? Did you have to paint the name of the cottage in 8-inch letters on the wheelie bin? Could you not have made it neater?
So there were mundanities.
Totally.
And you've talked about him being depressive. I mean, this was something that later in life he was diagnosed as having suffered from a child, wasn't it?
Oh, yes. It was grim. Living with severe depression and obsessive-compulsive disorder is really a terrible thing. It was hard, really, on everyone who had to do with Geoffrey, and hardest of all on himself.
Alex, I wonder if there's an image of him that you have in your mind when you think of him.
There is the image of him dancing with our baby daughter and singing to her. There's the many images of him with children and grandchildren.
The butterflies, high flyers on high winds, invisible to us they plane and soar. Beyond our minds' troubled conventioning, and do not err.
What I'm looking forward to is the things that he's left unpublished to be published after his death, the things he was working on when he died, because that will be like having a continuing conversation.
And is there a large body of work available still to be published?
Yes. For him, writing was what made life worthwhile.
Alice Goodman on her husband Sir Geoffrey Hill, who's died aged 84.